Welcome, everyone. This is the ECIS Special Educational Needs Learning Support Group. This year, we've decided to do monthly events, and it's wonderful that you're joining us by spreading the word to also your other colleagues. Together, I think we can achieve more in helping all our students find success. Let's build together a powerful and collaborative support system. Through our ECIS Learning Support Special Educational Needs site, we can share upcoming events, interesting articles, tools, books, professional development opportunities, just to support each other. I look forward to seeing you on our next sessions, and I hope you find them interesting and you give us your feedback. I'd like to turn the microphone to Eleni, who is going to present for us this afternoon or morning, depending where you're coming from.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our first event hosted by the Student Support Special Interest Group. And thank you, Chris, for all your help all these years and all your support. You have actually built this system for us. So we really want to thank you for your chairmanship and presidency. I want to welcome, I can see Patrick, I can see Sarah Kupke. I'm so happy to see you, Sarah. Zach, David, Boyd, Martina, Nisanart, Lito, Kami, Adam, Alison, Carrie-Ann, Jem, Melanie. Am I forgetting someone? Okay, welcome wherever you are. This is going to be a presentation from our experience. I'm the SOS coordinator, Student-Oriented Services Coordinator at MSF Frankfurt. I was previously in Stuttgart with Sarah. And we, all these years, I think it's very interesting to see the juice and the vitamins of inclusion and of inclusive education, and of course, mental health for our students and how to support them. We hopefully want to be, this is going to be a presentation which you'll find useful, and we would love to see you in our next events. We want to thank Kam Shokan for her also as the executive director of the ECIS, really sensitive in all of these issues. Chris, as I said, and of course, Joe Whitson, who has been and who will be the moderator today. Our agenda for today, let's see, and Peggy just came now. I'm trying to, yes. So our agenda for today, I hope you can see, everybody can see the screen, correct? Of course, mental health issues and forms during the pandemic times. It was a challenging year around the world for all international schools, for all our colleagues, for ourselves. How we can support this was a traumatic event. We have to realize and to define this as a traumatic event, of course. Starting with organizational culture, DEI, this is the diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools, and how this can help with mental health problems and their support. Building trust and relationships, which is very important. We do not need to like everyone. We don't need to like our colleagues or our leadership team. So we need to trust them. I think trust is a basis which is very important for collaboration and support. Support our parents also and our community in the schools. Remove the barriers to inclusiveness and inclusion. And we will also look into the International School Counselors Association principles and values. It takes a little bit of time to go to the next template. Okay, from the statistics we've seen from UNESCO, from the European Union, this is an article from Education Week, we can see that the forms of mental health problems during the pandemic, the majority, they took the form of social isolation. And I know that if we, in our next events, we would like to have discussions with you, we will surely get the experiences from you as well, that it was very traumatic for our students in international schools. And of course, we've seen anxiety and stress. not just school related, I will say future related, are grade 10 to 12s at MSF Frankfurt. They were very, very anxious to see what was going to happen with their university applications, their exams. You know, even we didn't know if the IB exams were going to be successful for them and if they were going to happen. The IGCSE exams as well. There are problems and troubles concentrating. They had difficulty handling the emotions, and I'm sure you can add a lot of things. And in the chat room, please add also your own contributions so we can see what was your experience. These are the official statistics. Of course, statistics are a little bit tricky sometimes because they do not give the actual image and the whole picture of the problems. I would add also the stability in families. Many people lost their jobs due to the pandemic. And we had also issues in my school where many parents were not able to work, or they had to immediately change their routine in their everyday life. So a lot of demands there. Our Association of School Counselors, the American Association of School Counselors, and the International Association of School Counselors, with Cheryl Brown, which is the executive director, are using this almost Bible, this book there that I have, the Ethics and Law, for mental health supporting and well-being, and of course the counseling departments. It is a very good recommendation for you to have this book in your departments, in your counseling and support departments in international schools, as it gives through court decisions and through the identification of potential problems in counseling in schools, moving backwards from the court cases, how things would have been better for counseling. They give us some really nice principles and values. First of all, counseling and well-being in schools should be based on supporting student development, which is also holistic, social, emotional, learning, and behavioral. The confidentiality issues, which is, I think, it's actually an umbrella of questions in our minds. How do we record confidential discussions? How can we eliminate corridor discussions? Because our colleagues, of course, they're very caring and supportive teachers. They want to talk about the problems. And as humans, we tend to talk more about problems and firstly about problems than anything else. So how we eliminate corridor discussions in schools about confidential issues. This is another problem. And this book with, again, from the Association of School Counselors, answers all of those questions and gives offers protocols. A choice of inclusive words also, that's important in mental health. We cannot say Eleni, for example, the autistic Eleni or the depressed Eleni. It's better if we use, if we remember that we are not our diagnosis, we are not our problems, we are not our difficulty. So it's Eleni with a depressive mood problem or Eleni with autism or Asperger's. It is important to use a terminology which is inclusive, because of course perception and language forms our actions and our behavior. This is also the era of using comprehensive data in schools, and it's I'm sure Sarah from Stuttgart, but also Chris from Athens would really agree with that. How important it is to have information and data from schools, data regarding our students, their emotional health, their performance in school, their learning, but also data that provide themselves in moving into a student agency era. Our counseling programs should have academic, career, and social emotional learning plans in place for our students. Another notion, another very, very important concept is how we manage and how we sustain healthy, honest, dual relationships with our colleagues, with our parents, and primarily with our students, and how we manage the boundaries, especially in the counseling relationship. This is more important. Where are the boundaries exactly? Appropriate, of course, data-driven referrals for our MTSS. This is multi-tiered support system. You can put in the chat room also if you use MTSS systems in your schools, and if you're aware of them. In other words, if your student support and counseling services use tier systems in order to track and support the referral cases, the referred students. Identification of serious and foreseeable harms to others, to students, this is very, very important for child protection policy. Of course, supporting underserved and at-risk populations. The issue of technical and digital citizenship, of course, cyberbullying, the healthy use of social media, which I'm sure it's an issue in many schools. In my school, without, in an anonymous way, I can mention to you that we had really serious cyberbullying incidents, and we didn't have in place the protocols to management the crisis of cyberbullying, and we had to put them in place, use them. And of course, the issue of virtual and telemedical distant counseling, and how we record, and if we can record, and who can record discussions that are between a student and a counselor. The Center for the Trauma Informed Education, trauma-related education, is very interesting and has very important resources for your schools and your departments for student support and counseling. If they don't already, you can pass this information to them. And of course, I think we have counselors in our discussion chatting group today. The three basic principles we have seen from training, from my personal experience, from the team. By the way, our team now in the MSF Frankfurt it's numbers 9 people already. So we have 2 school counselors and 1 school psychologist. So the 3 basic principles, the 3 basic, let's say, manifestations that we should have is prevention via the school climate and culture, positive learning experiences and environments, fully integrated cohesive approaches to learning and counseling support, instruction, school management, effective, I would say, leadership, MTSS systems, and effective alignment of the services in-house and the external specialists that we have, school psychologists or therapists or other student support related professionals. Immediacy in response, that's very important. Also, not just training that has to do with the cases and the diagnosis, but also training that will give us and will offer us protocols and will give our counselors protocols and flow charts and specific steps in the mental support of teenagers, especially in the pandemic year, whereby there is a clarification of the cause, and of course, correlation is not causation, at least in all cases. Normalize reactions, encourage the expressions, and apply stress management strategies. In many cases, we have cognitive behavioral therapy, which is applied by the school psychologist or the external therapists. The definition of trauma, again, in the pandemic year, we are talking about trauma because that was, as it is in other situations like war or mass fatality events, a traumatic experience. So this term has received increased attention in education over the past decade. And of course, it includes the witnessing violence on the street or at home, having a member attempt suicide or die, being raised in an environment that undermines a sense of safety and stability, and puts a threat in kind of is a threat for emotional or physical well-being, mental health or medical problems, parental separation, and other issues, of course, in families. There is a definition, and there is actually a differential definition between acute and chronic and complex trauma. Our counselors and student support teams themselves, we should be aware of the overlapping in cases of trauma symptoms and behaviors, for example, in ADHD, and when there is ADHD and there is also an abuse or neglect, or when we have comorbidity issues in cases, for example, ADHD and dyslexia, where, of course, the image of the teenager who is being supported is being affected, and we have to be sensitive in that. In our discussions with learning support teachers, and I can share this with you, many times we try to find ways to effectively support, but at the same time find a way to disguise our support so that the image of the student is being is protected, which is very important. Some variables regarding the trauma event, when we have a trauma, mass fatality, war, pandemic, or any other type of trauma, is of course predictability. How could it have been predicted and preventing measures, the duration, how much time it lasted, consequences after the aftermath of the event, and the intensity. Just to remember a little bit in our minds, what is the pandemic, when it started, what was the first manifestation in school, how this affected mentally, emotionally, and learning. Of course, there was a loss of learning. This is also measured by UNESCO and other big institutions and organizations. And if I remember well, The Economist has also, in many articles, has also posted that it's equal to the loss of learning at the first 1 month, 2 months, is equal to 6 months of being out of schools. So a lot of loss of learning there. The National Institute of Mental Health, US-based, deals with a lot of those issues and has resources online, protocols, flow charts, specific steps where your counselors or yourselves can get the knowledge and can be helped. And also there are downloadable, printable versions of protocols. We have actually built a database at UNICEF Frankfurt with all of these useful protocols and specific management systems for a variety of different situations and cases. And not all of them have been used so far, because we didn't have a lot of problems, for example, drug abuse, but we had a lot of issues with cyberbullying, for example. Something that is really important as well in schools, and we have to remember, we are not islands. Yes, we are connected. We are having relations with our colleagues. We also belong to the same iceberg. We are sitting there. The iceberg of organizational culture, of course. We have the tip of the iceberg, as we say, where we can see the behaviors and the artifacts and manifestations of our cultures, our beliefs, and also underlying assumptions. So it's important to take into consideration Edgar Shane's model, which comes from the MIT's Sloan Management faculty in the US, whereby he talks about the importance of understanding all layers of culture. When we have to bring change, when we have to bring positive change, when we have to become more inclusive, it's important to address both the artifacts, the beliefs as artifacts, the mission statements of the school, what we announce, and of course what we really believe deeply. This is in order to really remove any limitations, any barriers to inclusiveness pertaining to personal beliefs about inclusion, about diversity, and about equity. Of course, it's really important, as we said earlier, to view the child, the student, our learner, as a holistic, of course, in a holistic framework. So when we're looking at them, remember that they have a social, emotional aspect, a behavior, learning, social as well. They belong to the community and their families, and they have particular and specific needs, emotional, behavioral, learning. Therefore, where you can see again the iceberg in another concept here, when we have success, but if we could, let's say, take out success and use the word failure, we would see that we have to factor in all of these factors: persistence, the resilience, the study skills, the cope mechanisms that our learners have, the discipline, whether they put the hard work or not in, whether they're dedicated, and factor in all the different manifestations of this interplay, yes, in our learner's personality. Child protection policies in schools. Of course, we should be aware our student support departments, our counseling departments, our leadership all the teachers should be aware of the school, of the child protection policy. And of course, the ECIS has been instrumental in helping all teachers in international schools and being knowledgeable about the child protection policies and issues and different concepts. So getting to know our documents, the flow charts, and the protocols for crisis management is very, very important in schools. I would say, from my experience, and I would like to hear your experiences in your context. Building trust, engineering trust, and then re-engineering when there is a fail out, when there is a failure, which can happen. It's really, really important. And of course, the most important thing in trusting, again, versus liking someone, trusting is more important, is the issue of being reliable. Yeah, I mean what I say, I say what I mean. Being accountable for my actions. I will deliver what I promise. Being non-judgmental, especially in a counseling discussion in a pandemic year, it's very important. It's not your fault. Yeah. In integrity, generosity, and of course, being confidential when we are having confidential discussions. And of course, knowing our boundaries. This comes from Feldman's model in building trust in work, and it can be used in educational contexts. 3 tenets of forming genuine and trustful relationships: be real, be consistent, and be a listener. And I would say be an active listener. Open communication and accessibility, role modeling, independence and collaboration, student agency, respect, exchange of knowledge and skills is really also very important in order to build a trustful relationship. Supporting our parents. As a learning support teacher primarily, I can say to you that we have 3 main categories of parents when it comes to special educational needs, or as is the IB term, students with learning and assessment access requirements. We have overprotective parents, we have parents undermining the problem, and we have the third group, which we are very happy to collaborate with, parents that are cooperative, realistic, and balanced. We need to support all of them. And of course, number 1 and number 2, they need more of our attention and work and effort in building, again, a trustful and open and honest communication and relationship. What we are using in our school at MSF Frankfurt is the following, let's say, 5 principles, 5 values. We view them as vitamins, almost as vitamins in fruits. So keeping a language simple. Not everyone, including me, is an English native speaker. So therefore, we have to keep our language simple, especially towards our students. Using visualizations to enhance their understanding and to maximize their understanding and comprehension. Modifying questions. Provide explanations. And of course, to remember that differentiation is primarily about content, what I teach, is about the process, how I teach it, and what I assess my students on. Yes. So remembering that this is actually the route, this is the tool, this is the pathway, starting from diversity, which is the reality in schools, via equity, to inclusion, which is a goal. And then I think self-assessing, stopping and thinking. We are very busy, we're overwhelmed in our teaching lives to stop and think and have a moment of self-assessment and self-evaluation. I can share with you personally that I journal every day. It helps me immensely with how I work and how I manage and coordinate the department. It's important to identify how you do things, what has been erroneous, what has been wrong in your approach, and how you can go about more informed in the next day. I did not use that before, and it was, I would say it has been really, really beneficial. So stopping and having a self-assessed moment. stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. Yes, the protocol you can use also with your students, and we're going to share this presentation with you, so you can also make cards if you like, printables for your students and your colleagues. Now, when we're thinking about inclusion in terms of mental health, inclusion in terms of learning problems and learning difficulties, including, we can please ask to mute yourself so we can, I don't know whether you can hear me.
Hello.
Hello, could you please mute yourself? I will give you the opportunity to talk at the end. Want to go through a presentation now. Thank you. So when we are talking about inclusion and inclusivity and inclusiveness, when there is a situation where there is a standstill and we see a case of a student not being included, especially today we're referring to mental health problems, we have to remember and we have to become detectives almost in going into an investigative phase and look out about the barriers of inclusiveness to see what is preventing the inclusiveness in schools, why this happens, how, and what can I do about it. So we have how many? Around 10 big groups of barriers. And I would say, it's attitudes and beliefs. I've done a survey in the school, and we realized in about 130 colleagues that attitudes and beliefs about inclusion and about learners with difficulties, about learners with mental health problems, is maybe one of the most important factors when we are confirming, when we are our perception, and when we are forming our behavior towards students. So a good reminder here to know what is the umbrella of the barriers, what is the framework of barriers in international schools for inclusive education, and how we can then target each of these sections, each of these areas, or multiple areas in order to go into more inclusive schools. Inclusion is almost like a recipe of a nice pie, yes, of a nice plate. So we need ingredients, we need balanced ingredients. We need, of course, to believe in their success. When there is a mental health issue, when there's a learning difficulty, first of all, we have to believe in ourselves that they can do it. And of course, that we can help them. Building, as we said already, a trustful relationship with the parents themselves and with our colleagues and our leadership. So building trustful relationships, again, this is versus liking someone. This is versus having, having a special, we can have friends and circles, but it's more important to have trust in our relationships and honest communication for problems. Engage our students and our learners. It's important to do this. First of all, the one thing that we've seen in many international schools is the seating plans in the classrooms that play a critical role in how they manage their relationships and their friendships as teenagers. Student engagement with humor, that's another ingredient for our recipe. And we are referring to pedagogical humor and not to sarcasm. Effective, simple evidence-based strategies for instruction and teaching, and of course, learning strategies for our learners. And I would say, as a little bit like a salt, like a spice, creativeness, flexibility, self-assessment, and examination of our theories and our practice, of our theory and our practice of the day. And of course, the humor, as we said earlier, that can unlock standstill. We have seen in the department, and when there is a crisis management problem, humor might not be really useful, but it is useful when there is a learning difficulty. When especially students with ADHD or students that are gifted are having a special interest for engaging into discussions with teachers that they have humor. Of course, the pedagogical humor is when you have two previously unrelated ideas now bringing like lighting up the bubble in your mouth, in your mind, and then of course in your mouth, and talking also yourself in a humorous way, and creating new ways of thinking and new ways of expressing yourself. So very, very important. We've seen that it works very well. The UDL concept I don't know whether you've heard about the universal design of learning. This is a new framework, a new context of thinking how a student learns, and it stems from the neuroscience and neuroscientific research, whereby we see different areas of brain associated with different learning actions. So we have affective networks for the why of learning, we have recognition networks for the what of learning, and the strategic networks for the how. Thereby we can talk about engagement, presentation, and action and expression. The UDL, in other words, which also you can see online if you just simply Google Universal Design of Learning by CAST in US, it's a framework whereby we can provide alternative means of representation to our learners. By a simple example, we can have a student that is really interested in football, but does not like to read, does not like to write. We can use his own interest for football, or in other cases, other interests, in order to help him read and write. So we use that interest and we provide alternative means. This is also related to being flexible and adaptable. And of course, we know a lot about differentiation, about the content, the process, the product, and the learning environment. This presentation is not so much about differentiation, but we wanted to give you as a group this idea of using differentiation also when you're teaching students with mental health problems in pandemic, especially because we've seen that it was needed. There was a need for changing our content and our process, especially when we were going into distant or online learning. It was necessary that we will see those changes applied. When we have, for example, a language lesson and we want to differentiate, there are some useful accommodations, useful changes, using the brainstorming on think tank groups in the beginning of a lesson. And there we have to be careful that when we are assigning groups and we are grouping, we are giving specific roles and responsibilities for a group, so that the more active students, they have a role and they know the boundaries, and the more shy students and timid students try to also engage and they have a specific role and they know what they're doing. It's a helpful information for them. It's a helpful base, a helpful start for them to engage into the group. Provide graphic organizers, anything that can organize their thinking, giving direction, instruction in a clear way, again with a basic vocabulary, avoiding the complex phrasal verbs for our EA learners or learners with with English, which is not very strong, and providing a summary of ideas, providing explanations, synonyms, and of course we can use the experts we have in all classes to answer questions. Now, the overview, when we have differentiation, students, of course, having difficulties are made audience as our target population, especially in pandemic, we in Frankfurt, but also in other schools. And I think we have discussed this, Chris, in our previous discussions with the group. We've seen a lot of stress and overwhelming, I would say, increase of stress in examinations, both the HCC and the IB. And we had to manage almost in a very critical condition and situation, the stress and the anxiety. I can also share with you that we had 4 students diagnosed with stress, exam-related stress before their exams. So a major issue here for during the pandemic, and how we can help again. First of all, it starts with the relationship and your good and well intentions. The language, the style, the visuals, the synonyms you use for your exams, where, of course, and when you are able to differentiate that. But also, even if you cannot differentiate the content of an exam, if it's a ready-made exam coming from the IB or the HCC, you can always help with clarifying your instructions and keep providing hints and clues, even with the tone of voice. Some resources, of course, to differentiate. We will share the presentation with you, and there are multiple and I will say limitless resources on differentiating, and you can also adjust them to all of your departments. Either it's a science department, or a math department, or language department, so they can differentiate. Some very important institutes and organizations, and the ECIS also collaborates with the International School Councils Association, the Trauma Center, pertaining to health trauma, of course, and some also institutions from UK, and of course the American School Council Association, who is giving a lot of resources online. You can visit the page, and you can download and print and copy for your colleagues and counselors. Many resources on mental health. And of course, in pandemic, especially they were very. I was very impressed. They were very active and proactive to have COVID-19 related resources on the websites. Some books we use, different resources we use for the RTI application. RTI is a response to intervention. In other words, when a student is referred and I'm applying a strategy, very simply to help him, I need to assess to see his response. Using, as we said earlier, MTSS and multi-tiered support systems. The differentiated classroom, the visible learning by Hattie, of course, to see which strategies and what kind of instructional routines and styles are very beneficial for students' learning, are presented in this book, and we are using it largely, I would say, in our training. Thank you so much. I would like now to hear you. You can unmute yourselves to discuss a little bit about your experiences during the pandemic. Who would like to go first?
Hi, I'm from Bangkok, American School of Bangkok. Just wondering if you could elaborate more on equity, because coming from so many different cultures in an international school setting, I think that perhaps people from the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern may also have different definitions of equity. So if you could just elaborate on that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Nisanar, thank you so much for your question. That's very important. So we are looking into populations in international schools that are diverse in terms of gender, races, language, right, as an origin, country origin, and learning styles, and of course including their students with disabilities, either learning or physical. Our target is inclusion, everyone to be holistically and meaningfully included. Now we have to pass through equity, and equity and equitability is where we are now perceived as equals. Now this is an issue, of course, in international schools, and I think ECIS has addressed the matter, I think, largely in the last conference, leadership conference, whereby we talked about the importance of being diverse when hiring staff, and also when you're including students in schools, and provide and actively, proactively, not reactively, but proactively push the agenda of equity and equitability and then inclusion in schools. I think you would agree with me. I hope I answered your question, but there are lots of DEI, we call them DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI initiatives, especially in the business world. And we have to see this also coming into our international schools and education.
So how do you help your school community define or come to a consensus what equity means in each school culture?
So it's equity in each school culture. Equity in our schools is where it's a concept where it's actually a reality. It has to be a reality that we are equal, but we are different. So we are diverse. That's a reality, and then inclusion is our goal. But we have to understand that we are equal. We are different, but we are equal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nisanar. Any other question? Sarah.
Eleni, can I just ask? Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for a really well prepared presentation. I might suddenly disappear because there's an upgrade going on my computer. But just to say, you know, I thought Nisanat's question was an interesting one regarding equity, in that specific to what you've been talking about here with differentiation. You know, there's some lovely images out there in the internet of the difference between equality and equity, right? And that if we all start at the same level with the same resources, we may not be able to use them in the same ways. And so we have to adapt our resources in order to be able to support different levels of understanding, different experiences, perhaps. You know, our students come to our schools with a vast range of different experiences, and because they're not accessing the curriculum in the way that we expect them to, doesn't necessarily mean that they are any less intelligent or haven't great chances of being extremely successful human beings in one way or another, but that they can't access because they have a different experience. That might be a lingual experience, that might be a cognitive experience. And so we need to provide for them in order to create equity. I think the whole idea of diversity is so fascinating because it's sometimes seen as a problem to be solved. And I don't see it that way at all. I see diversity as something which we have an opportunity to be able to embrace in international schools and really celebrate. Thank God we're all different, and we all come with our different kind of windows on you know, perspectives on things, but also experiences and things. So I think it's a really great thing that you brought up there in terms of the question, and the difference between what is equity and what is equality.
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with you, Sarah. That's a very interesting point you make, and thank you for that. And Nisanat as well. And Sarah, I know you're doing a lot of things in Stuttgart, in Sindelfingen campus, regarding you know, all these issues about inclusion. And it's really, really good to know that. Really good to know that. Any other question or any other? Would you like to share with us? Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I noticed that a lot of your presentation had to do with making learning visible. And that was one of the core principles and beliefs. I was curious if programs like Making Learning Visible, if you think that's sufficient for students with additional learning needs, or if there's a good program out there that is making learning visible in a way specifically targeted for students with additional learning needs.
So this book refers to strategies that teachers can use in class, and especially about direct instruction, and how also we have to be very clear when we are providing instructions in you know, and how this is done. So actually in the book, he's almost dissecting the instructional moment from the time it starts till the end, and provide different strategies for every different time, but also measuring the efficacy of different instructional strategies. So your question is whether we should make the learning visible, the learning of students with learning needs?
Yes, I guess it was about the book, and also just, I know it's great practice, and I know that generally it is great pedagogy, but I was wondering if there was a subset of resources that are focused towards students with additional learning needs, maybe also emotional needs, in addition to EAL populations.
Yes, there are some really nice books regarding not just the RTI, how you define them, but also how you how you use instruction. That is really interesting and very important for students with learning needs. And you can see those books. For example, I can have it in our next. We will have it actually in our special group website, and I will upload books that have to do with exactly what you're asking, Boyd. So yes, there are lots of books. Any other question?
Hi, yeah, I have a question. You, in your presentation, you mentioned about helping kids that have maybe they're great at football, but maybe they're not good at maths. And you mentioned how we could use their ability in football to say help with maths. but you didn't really elaborate on that. So I just wondered if you wouldn't mind giving an example just to help help understand how we could use that if they're very skilled in a particular class or subject, how we can then help them utilize that for a different style of learning.
Sure, David. This actually comes, that's a very good question, and thank you. This comes from an experience I had in Istanbul. When I was teaching there, there was a student that did not like reading. It was not about maths, it was about his interest in reading. Yeah, it's in writing actually. And he was saying to me, oh, Mrs. Eleni, I don't want to write this essay, you know, just, I don't like this at all. So, okay, what you like? I like football. Okay, so let's write you know, an article on a game on a match you watched, you know, this earlier this week. So I'm just saying, use their interest, use what they are saying they like in order to approach the subjects that they find more, you know, more demanding. So he wrote an article and he was able to present it in class. We were highlighting also color coding the difficult words for him. Because it was interesting for him, for example, the word referee, you know, you could then go and do some, you know, branches off with the other words and, you know, the family or the family word. And it was easy for him to approach the, you know, the reading and writing, at least not be afraid of it. And you know, David, that, you know, self-confidence is a factor one, I would say, in learning and everything in life, I'm not mistaken, right? So even if you don't know something, your ability not to be afraid of something and researching on it is it's really helpful. So if you at least show him that he can use his interest to learn and to approach reading and writing, I think that you are at least at block win number one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Helping make it more relevant for them as well.
Yes, more relevant, exactly. Yeah. Any other concern? I would like to ask you all, how have you seen, I mean, I know we have a lot of people from Bangkok. How have you seen the mental health problems manifesting during the pandemic in your schools? Have you seen an increase in mental health, or have you seen that it was, you know, the same, more or less? Anyone would like to share with us? Chris, have you seen anything in your context, in your framework?
I haven't, am I on? I am. I haven't seen anything, because don't forget, I'm still on vacation. Schools haven't, but there's a definitely talk, and there's, especially in Greece as well, there's a talk about the need of putting a counselor or psychologist in every school, because especially in public schools, there are not any such positions in the schools. So they are seeing a lot more in-house violence. They're seeing bullying. They're seeing things that they kind of have been under the carpet for a while. Let's put it that way. They were not seen. And now they're becoming more evident. I think the social emotional aspect, the going back and forth from virtual learning to face-to-face learning, it was like a roller coaster. For some kids, it worked better for the virtual learning, while others just lost the learning during that time. So I don't think there's one answer. I think it depends on the students you work with, the support systems that are in place, and how each school is proactive, like all of yours, otherwise you wouldn't be here, in providing such services for the parents, for the educators, and for the students. Because if everybody's on the same page, they hear the same thing, then the support system becomes a lot stronger.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. It's important to build our systems, and of course, not only the systems that have to do with differentiation and support, learning support, but also the systems of counseling. I think not all, at least in our department, we had a lot of gaps regarding, you know, crisis management issues and protocols and behavioral management, because we had cyberbullying and bullying cases, mental health protocols. and also networking with our external therapists here in Frankfurt, and providing English speaking, not only English speaking, but also Korean speaking or Japanese, or so that the families that do not speak German, since we're in Germany, they can have counseling, they can be offered counseling services in their language. So it is a tricky, I think, a question and a tricky activity and an action when you're coordinating a department like that, but you need the networking. Yes, and you need the systems in place. I would also say you need clear guidelines when you're in student support, and also clear policies when it has to do with counseling and student support. Any other question, and any other concern, any other point you would like to make?
Hi there.
Okay, let's see who is.
It's Adam.
Yes, Adam. Hello, Adam. Hi.
Hi there.
You're joining from where?
Well, I'm in Bangkok as well. You can tell by the shirt,
Yeah.
the funky shirt.
Great.
In Bangkok, we've gone back into lockdown and e-learning, and one of the things I liked about your presentation, apart from the academic rigor with all the sources, was the focus on like being able to support students emotionally. I'm just wondering, now that we've gone back in, supporting students emotionally seems to be obviously a lot easier when it's face-to-face and in the school, when we've, counselors, psychologists available to the students. Teachers now, what tools do you have, or would you suggest that we could give to our kids now we're going back to online teaching?
What tools? This is the question.
Yeah, what emotional support tools do you think teachers could give the students when we're now going back online teaching?
Yes, so we have trained our counselors. We have one counselor actually from this year. We only had one counselor for all grades. So first of all, to answer your question, Adam, we went structurally. Yes, we made structural changes. Instead of having one counselor for everyone, grades 3 to 12, which was not manageable as a caseload, we actually have now one school psychologist dealing with more, intensive, cases that need intensive intervention, and has to do with a lot of, counseling. And we unfortunately had also suicidal ideation, SI, and NSSH. So we had non-suicidal self-harm manifesting in school. So we had to have a school psychologist. We took a decision and hired one, and also have two counselors, one to answer your specific question for ECL, so social and emotional learning, for grades 6 to 9, and one for grade 10 to 12. So that's a structural change. The tools, they are now building an advisory program, which is going to be, it's going to happen every Friday mornings with all grades 6 to 12. And there we're going to have the tools. I'll be happy to upload in our content, in our pages, and also our colleagues from the special interest group, specifically for your question, tools that have to do with social and emotional learning. That's a very good point. It's a very good point. I would say the one principle is name your emotions, because then you can control them. If you don't acknowledge them, and if you don't name them, and you constantly avoid them, you cannot control them. At least when you name them and define them, find the causation. Maybe it's too much, but defining your, I feel now, right now I feel like this, then you control them immediately. I would say that's the first thing that we were saying to our students during the pandemic, the first phases.
I would also.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, I would also add that if every student had a list of 1 or 2 other people they could talk to about anything, could be a teacher, could be a counselor, could be a friend, if they're older, that they can talk things out with them. That seems to be effective as well, especially if we're online learning, because you want them to be able to figure things out before they escalate. So if they have a plan, if I'm feeling frustrated or have anxiety, or I feel like I can't deal with something, who is the person I can talk to. And they have I have a student right now in mind that has 3 people that she can go to, 1, 2, or 3 people that she can talk about things out before it escalates and gets her in trouble. So there's not one way of dealing with it. And like Eleni said, we're building up our page on the ECIS website and providing useful resources, because what works for me, for example, might not work with you, and that, not you personally, but the student you're working with. So it's not a recipe. You have to take different things from different places, as you know, to make things work depending on the student needs. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this session. I think Eleni reminded us once again why we have chosen to work in schools. Each one of you showed me that you care. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So let us grow as a group to support each other. And if you are interested, it's joining for free on the ECIS website, the Learning Support Special Educational Needs Group. And we're in the process of uploading resources, professional development opportunities, interesting books and things like that. So we keep everything in one place. And of course, you can also share the resources that you have and what works for you. We're planning to have a monthly session that will be open to whoever is interested on different topics. And if you have topics that are burning in back of your mind that you would like us to investigate and get people to talk to you about, we'll be more than happy to make this connection. Thank you, Eleni. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for immediately. You're the winners. You were here because you care for your students. So we really, really want to thank you.
Thank you very much from ECIS as well. It's great to have such a supportive special interest group supporting the work that we do. I will be following up an email, hopefully tomorrow, with a recording of this session if you've missed anything, and the PowerPoint so you can access all the wonderful links that Eleni has shared. Have a lovely evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And I hope to see you at the next workshop. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.